Real quick, my dudes, before we start the video, I just wanted to say that the long-awaited and asked for Aurelian shirt is now available at Teespring. The restorer of the world and the unconquered sun. I worked with a really talented dude on this design and I think it came out really cool. So if you want to support the channel and rock one of the greatest Roman emperors of all time on your shirt, just head on over to the Teespring link in the description. Thanks, my dudes.
There was once a dream that was Rome.
Ave, my dudes, and welcome back to Pax Romana. The position of Roman consul is one of the most famous political offices in human history. It's right up there with the leader of the free world and the god emperor of mankind. During the time span of the Roman Republic, this was the highest position a man could achieve, the top and final position of the cursus honorum. The cursus honorum is Latin for course of honors, or more simply, ladder of offices. Designed for men of senatorial rank, it was a sequential order of ever more prestigious offices, ending with, of course, a year as Roman consul. Think of it as starting as a fry cook and ending as a general manager of your local Wendy's. Just way less depressing. The first two consuls of the Roman Republic, who were installed after they kicked out the last king of Rome, Tarquin the Proud, were Lucius Tarquinius Callantius, whose unfortunate name would end up souring his time in office, and of course, Lucius Junius Brutus, the ancestor of the probably more famous Marcus Junius Brutus, one of the murderers of Caesar. Over the time frame of the Republic, there was many accomplished and successful consuls. For example, Cincinnatus, who was elected Suffolk consul, which means he finished the term for another man. He would later become dictator as well. Famously talked off his farm to repel an invasion, he would become the Roman ideal of civic virtue. Marcus Furius Camillus won many battles against the Etruscans, including the final destruction of Veii. He would celebrate 4 triumphs in his life and was even given the title the second founder of Rome. One of my favorite early Romans, and possibly the man with the most base name in all of Roman history, Titus Manlius Imperius Torquatus. He was consul 3 times and most famously defeated a giant Gaul in combat. I'm gonna go on record and say that definitely happened. Scipio Africanus of Second Punic War fame was consul twice. He's most well known for defeating Hannibal at the Battle of Zama, but also conquered large swaths of Iberia for Rome. Rivals Gaius Marius and Lucius Cornelius Sulla would square off as enemies, but both had incredible careers as consul. Sulla captured the Numidian king Jugurtha and also defeated multiple German tribes and won many battles in the Social War. Marius fought and won battles in both the Cimbric and the Jugurthean War, claiming victory in both. He set a record by being named consul 7 times in his career. Maybe most famously known for his reforms of the Roman military, making large-scale changes to the infrastructure of the army, this would have huge military and economic impacts for the Republic and later for the Empire. So all of that is well and good. A distinguished list of Roman men who served the Republic well. But who was the last man to hold the title of consul? The office didn't stop with the ascension of Augustus to emperor. It would continue to hold on even as a shadow of its former glory for centuries. There were consuls during the reign of Caligula or Vespasian, during the reign of Trajan and Hadrian, through the crisis of the 3rd century, during the acceptance of Christianity, and through the fall of the Western Roman Empire. So at what point did the office disappear? Well, I could tell you that after the reign of one particular emperor, the title was rolled into a long list of imperial titles, giving it to every successive emperor, with Leo VI, better known as Leo the Wise, being the last Augustus to use that title, his reign ending in the year 912 AD. We also know that the late Roman practice of handing out honorary consulships would continue in the East until at least the 12th century. Yet, I am interested in knowing who was the man to hold the actual office of consul last. Not an honorary title or an emperor himself, but a Roman man of noble birth who called himself consul. So today, we will take a deep dive into this question, which I thought might be as simple as a quick Google search. Now, Googling this question does bring up a name, but as I did more research, I realized it wasn't that simple. As I read papers written by people infinitely more intelligent than I realized there was actually a lot of debate on the topic. So let's go over some of that information today and try to figure out who was the last Roman consul. To begin, I want to say that I'm going to do my best to pronounce some of these Latin and Greek names, but I'm sure I'll mess up a few. Please feel free to roast me in the comments. Also, most of the information for this topic I researched came from a paper titled, and hold on, this is a long one. Let me read it off the screen here. Basileus and his Diptych again, career titles, seats in the Colosseum, and issues of stylistic dating by Alan Cameron. So shout out to Alan Cameron, because he a real one. So let's take a look at that word, Diptych. I spent a good amount of time trying to figure out how to pronounce it. So far I've heard Diptych, Diptych, Diptech, Diptych, and others. So I put a quick poll up on Twitter, and Diptych came out the winner. Although I can see the argument for others, we'll be using Diptych in this video. If I slip up and say another version, I do apologize. Because most of the information on this topic comes from a Roman diptych and speculation about it. A diptych is any object with two flat plates which form a pair, often attached by a hinge, usually a painting or a text, something usually valuable or celebrated. Consular diptychs were celebratory pieces usually commissioned by the consul himself in celebration of his appointment to the office, and were often distributed to supporters or people he hoped would support him in the future. The late Roman consular diptychs we have are very ornamented, and usually with a rich relief sculpture. There are two known workshops that made these consular diptychs. One was in Rome, and the other was in Constantinople. So what did the inside of these consular diptychs portray? Well, usually a stylized version of the man himself, with a dedicated, flattering description of him as well. One of the more popular choices was to show the consul presiding over the consular games, which marked his entry to the consulship. The oldest diptych that can really be called a consular diptych was commissioned by Anicius Petronius Probus, who was a consul in the Western Roman Empire in 406 AD. So that kind of gives you a time frame for the era of Roman history we're talking about here. So that brings us to the consular diptych of the man we believe to be the last ever appointed Roman consul. Let's introduce Anicius Faustus Albinus Basileus, or as I call him, AFAB, which does not stand for all Franks are bastards, although they are. AFAB's early years are foggy at best. We mostly believe that he became consul in the year 541 under the reign of Justinian the Great. He may have been the grandson of the consul of 480, Caecina Decius Maximus Basileus, and the son of the consul of 493, Caecina Decius Faustus Albinus. Yet 50 years separate their consulship, so it's truly impossible to know for sure. One rumor states that AFAB actually grew up rich, but both of his parents were killed early in his life due to criminals. He would then begin a life of intense physical training, where as he got older, he would put on a mask and go out and fight the criminals of Rome. That is now canon, so somebody should probably tell Alan Cameron. On a more serious note, the debate on this particular diptych is whether it's from 541 under the rule of Justinian the Great, or as some have argued, from the 480s, which would make AFAB a consul under the rule of Odoacer in Italy. Now, admittedly, this debate is a bit wordy. It has a lot to do with the art style of the diptych and the inscriptions on it. So first, let's look at the consuls of the 480s. The consuls of the 480s all held many offices before reaching the pinnacle of their careers with the consulship. Both Odoacer and Theodoric, in his early years, didn't rock the boat too much in Italy and allowed the Roman nobility to continue much as it had been for centuries. So the men who took the consulship climbed the ladder on their way to the top. Almost every man to be consul during this time either held an urban or praetorian prefecture, or both. Now, AFAB seemed to hold no office before he was made consul. That would have been unheard of Italy in the 480s and points towards AFAB not being part of Odoacer or Theodoric's regime. So you may be asking how we have particular information about consuls in the late 5th century. Good question. And that part is actually really cool. We have information on these men because of a century of historical work on inscriptions left on seats in the Flavian amphitheater. When these men became consul and held games, they were honored by having their names, family information, and accomplishments transcribed onto these seats. Pretty cool, I think. Which brings us to the title of patricate. Side note, there's also like 3 ways to pronounce that word, and I've been arguing with myself for like 10 minutes how to say it, but we're just gonna go with patricate. The patricate was not an office, but a title granted at the ruler's pleasure. In the West, under Odoacer and Theodoric, this was granted to men after their consulship and all of their other titles. AFAB was actually granted this title along with his consulship with no other prior titles. This points towards the 6th and not the 5th century. Most of these consuls had more titles than Tom Brady. So basically, Afab skipped to the front of the line when he was appointed consul, something we didn't see happening in the 480s in Italy, meaning we can infer that his appointment was probably done by somebody with the ultimate say in the matter, meaning the Emperor Justinian. Keeping the theme of titles going for a second, we have another title to discuss, and that's the Comes Domesticorum. In the Western Empire, this was a serious military title, and not one usually shared by the rich nobility. It had been a long time since the rich and noble in Rome actually fought in wars, and none of the consuls in the 480s held this title. But in the Eastern Empire, especially in the 6th century, that title was also used, but it was a synonym for the title Vicarus, meaning a subordinate to a duke or a superior. So while in the West, men with that title weren't usually high enough on the pecking order to be consul, good old Afab is both holding that title and consul, once again pointing us in the direction that Afab is unique. Let's also note the imperial eagle that's on Afab's diptych. At first glance, you could suggest that this is possibly from the 480s, yet Odoacer never wore the purple or the diadem, famously sending the imperial regalia back to the Eastern Empire in a statement declaring he wasn't the Western Roman emperor. Now, there was a deposed emperor alive until the year 480 in Julius Nepos. He was living in exile in Dalmatia, and it's fair to say that he had very little to do with proclamations or appointments in Italy. So the imperial eagle is yet another hint that Afab was appointed by an actual Roman emperor and not by some Italian German king. Look, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, hey, admin. All of this is interesting, and you make some solid points about why you think Afab is a consul from the year 541. But that diptych's art style is clearly Italian or Western in design. Not to mention it shows what is possible consular games in Rome, so you look like a big fat idiot. Hold on, viewer. I can explain. There is a way for Afab to be both appointed by Justinian the Great and also be a Western consul. That brings us to the year 541 AD. In that year, large portions of Italy, including Rome, had come back under control of the Roman Empire. Justinian was celebrating victories in Africa, and in 535, the Eastern Roman invasion of Italy had begun. From that time period of 535 to 541, there was no consular games held in Rome due to the war and the siege of 537 to 538. So what better way to celebrate the Eternal City being reclaimed to uphold one of its most ancient traditions and appoint a consul? There's actually no evidence of Afab living or even visiting Constantinople before this date. So it's probably fair to say that Justinian, although he didn't like the consulship, as he would never again appoint another one after Afab, bowed to tradition here and gave the city of Rome what it wanted, a consul and games. That would explain how the diptych is Western in nature, but how Afab was also appointed by the Eastern Roman Emperor. No man who lived in Rome and had his life and career wrapped up in the city would want to be named consul in far-off Constantinople, forever in the shadow of a gigantic figure like Justinian. Afab would have been appointed at the behest of the emperor, but would have stayed in the Eternal City where he could throw games for the Roman people and glorify his family name. In fact, Alan Cameron also points out that this particular diptych shares some artistic features with the very famous painting of Justinian at Ravenna, which according to Alan has to do with the placement of bodies, head shape, and angles. I'll take his word for it. Alan seems like a pretty smart guy. After a lot of historical debate about dates, art styles, last names, consular games, emperors, and old Roman titles, I am saying here today with a high level of confidence that our boy Anacius Faustus Albinus Basileus was in fact the last Roman consul. The last man in a line of men that stretches back to the 6th century BC, 1,048 years or 382,782 days of Roman history. From the beginning of the Roman Republic to the time of Justinian's reconquest of the West, the Roman world seen the Punic Wars, the conquests of the Mediterranean, the rise of Julius Caesar and his heir Augustus, and the start of the Roman Empire. The drama of Nero and Caligula, imperial heights under the 5 good emperors never seen before or since. The crisis of the 3rd century, the restorer of the world in Aurelian, Constantine the Great and the empire's move to Christianity, the splitting of the empire into East and West, and the eventual incredible tragedy of the fall of the Western Roman Empire. Through all of these years, men were appointed consul. Men led consular armies against the enemies of Rome, were in charge of the laws and justice of the empire, threw games for the people and for their own glory. No matter what was occurring, war, plague, civil unrest, transformation from republic to empire, these men were still appointed. Many were popular, many were not, but a 1,000-year-old tradition was carried on. Aphab was the last of these men, 1,000 years behind him. Time is a weird thing. I live in a country that isn't even 300 years old, and my history seems ancient to me. When I read of great men from my past, Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and Teddy Roosevelt, it makes me wonder, what did Aphab think or even know of past Roman consuls? Was he aware that he was the heir of 1,000 years to men like Scipio and Sulla? When he accepted the position from Justinian, did he think about Julius Caesar or Cincinnatus? I would like to think he did. My favorite part about history is the connections, the spiderweb that leads to the present. Nothing is created out of thin air. There's always a before. We are a product of our past, for better or for worse. Aphab was a product of the men who came before him. Some heroes, some villains, but it all led to him, and then it ended with him. Aphab was the final consul of Rome. You know, originally when I wrote that last sentence, I thought that would be a great spot to end. But as I was getting ready to record, I figured I would do some more research on Alan Cameron, the man responsible for 99% of the information in this video. Unfortunately, I would find out that Alan Cameron passed in 2017. Alan, who was born in 1938 in England, would attend Oxford as a young man and begin a career of teaching and writing that would last decades. Every book he's written, honestly, has incredible reviews, many stating that Mr. Cameron had a knack for mixing political history and literary sources. And he often wrote so not just the highly educated could enjoy his work, you know, like me. Alan Cameron was 79 years old and had written about the Roman Empire and the Hellenistic world for 47 years. Thank you for all your contributions to the study of history, Mr. Cameron. We salute you. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. And I also want to say thank you to some brand new patrons, Jackson Harris, Pan Stan, and Jeremy Abrahamson. If you'd like to join their noble ranks and see your name scroll across the screen in all its glory, head on over to patreon.com/updatingonrome. The Empire needs your support.